Let's take a look at how we can take an existing WPF app and bring it to macOS, Linux, iOS, Android, and the browser using technology from Avalonia UI. So the WPF app in question is very simple. I have it here loaded in Visual Studio. It's a calculator application and it's pure WPF. There's no third-party dependencies, so it's very basic. But it's going to show us everything we need in order to bring this app to new platforms. So let's run this so you can see how it looks on a PC, albeit a virtual machine. If you've ever used a calculator, this will all be very familiar to you. We divide by 0, we get a message box. But apart from that, there's really not much else to the application. It's very simple. So I'm going to shut down this virtual machine and we're going to open this project on the Mac. So here I am in Rider, and this is the exact same WPF project, and we can instantly see there's a lot of errors. So it's unable to resolve any of these types. Now that's because the W in WPF stands for Windows, and we're on a Mac, so it's kind of expected that that's not going to work. So we've got two solutions to bringing this over to the Mac and Linux and iOS, Android in the browser. And we'll start with Avalonia. So Avalonia is our free-to-use, open-source, cross-platform UI framework. You can grab this from GitHub, so if we go to github/Avalonia UI/Avalonia, we can grab the source code, we can fork this, it's permissive MIT license. So you can use this for free, and you can manually migrate your application over to being cross-platform. So that's what we're going to do to start with. So to kick things off, let's create a new solution. And I've got some Avalonia specific templates installed on my system. So when you install the Avalonia templates, you're going to have three different options. You have Avalonia.NET app, which is a desktop style application, which is using code behind rather than the MVVM architectural pattern. Then we have the MVVM pattern, which is still desktop only. And that's macOS, Windows, and Linux. And then lastly, we have this cross-platform application. So all of these are cross-platform, but the cross-platform application includes iOS, Android, and the browser because these require additional workloads to be installed. So in this case, we're gonna pick the cross-platform application. I don't care about the name because it's just a little demo that I'll throw away afterwards. But we're going to open the solution, and we can see that we've got multiple projects within the solution. So we have a shared project here, which is where our application is going to live. And this is using the MVVM pattern, which is model view, view model. If you've ever built a WPF app, a Xamarin Forms app, a Wing UI, a Maui app, or use any XAML technology, then you'll be familiar with this pattern already. So in this case, this shared project here is being referenced by the Android project, by the browser project, by the desktop project, and by the iOS project. If we take a look at the views, we have main window and main view. So why do we have that? Well, if we look at the app.cs, we can see that we have iClassic desktop styled application lifetime, and we have iSingleView application lifetime. So what's the difference? Well, the iClassic desktop style application lifetime is for when we're running on environments that have a desktop environment and the concept of a window. Not every device that Avalonia supports is going to have a windowing system. If we think about embedded devices where it's just a screen and there's no desktop environment, we're pushing pixels using the Linux frame buffer. And so we don't have a window. So in this case, where we're creating an instance of the main window, that just wouldn't make sense. So we have a different application lifestyle, and in this case, we're setting the main view to be this main view.xaml here. So let's take a look at the main window. We can see that it's actually very simple. It's just creating a main view instance, which is where our UI actually lives. Now, in this case, we're not using MVVM because the original project is just code behind. So we don't need the data context. We're not going to need this line of code. So let's just prep for starting that migration. We don't need to look at the main window again, but what we will need is the code behind for the main view, and we're going to need the app.xaml. So let's park this over to one side. Get rid of that, make a bit more space. And let's look at the original WPF project. So in here, we have our main window.xaml. We're going to need the code behind, so we'll open that. And we already have the app.xaml open. So we can see there's a ton of errors. 69 in the code behind, 183 in the main window XAML. So we've got some work to do to bring this over to Avalonia. So I'm just going to start copying and pasting code. So let me park this on the side. We'll keep the WPF project on the right, and we'll keep the Avalonia project on the left. So let's go to the main view.cs, and we're just going to paste in the code from the WPF project. Now that we've pasted it, let's go ahead and start fixing some of these issues. We can see we have 55 in total. Well, the first problem we have is that Avalonia doesn't have a message box API built in. There are third-party dependencies that we could bring in to solve that for us. But in this case, I want to keep things simple, so we're just going to comment out that line of code. I'm going to hit save, and we're going to look for our next set of errors. Well, label result is obviously a UI control, which would be defined in our XAML, which we've not updated yet. So this is an expected error. But rooted events are not existing. Well, that's just a namespace that we need to bring in. So let's import the missing namespace. And already we're seeing the number of errors decrease. Let's look to see if there's anything else that isn't related to a UI control not existing within the XAML. Okay, the last error then is going to be updating the constructor name. Let's fix the formatting there. Okay, so we're down to 46 errors, but I think they're all related to having not updated the main view yet. So let's do that. We'll pop this to the left, come back to the WPF project, heading to the XAML, and we have our window, and within that, the content of the window is this grid. So let's find where it ends. We're going to copy, we're going to paste that in. So I'm going to go full screen again on the Avalonia project. We've got 20 errors, but we can see that the main view, so the code behind, is now resolved all the errors. So we've got some warnings. We can live with warnings. But we've got 20 errors, which all seems related to the style property here. Well, we'll get onto that in a moment. First of all, let's do some improvements. So this is a little bit verbose for my liking. So let's simplify this. So what have we got? 4 of these. So the thing to remember with Avalonia is that it's not 100% compatible with WPF, but it's very, very similar. So there are improvements in many, many places. How many of these do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. I need one more. So the column definitions and row definitions is just one example of an improvement that we've made. But almost everything else is exactly the same, as you can see here. The biggest difference is the styles. So in this case, it's got this results, labels, styles. Let's focus on fixing this. So we'll go to the left and we'll come back to the WPF project. The styles are defined in the app.xaml, and immediately we can see some brushes have been defined. So let's copy those over to get started. And you'll notice that much of porting a WPF application to Avalonia is copying and pasting. It's not necessarily difficult work, but it's tedious. And when you've got a very, very complicated application, this can be a very time-consuming process. So we've got this last operation label style. This is the control or the style that we're going to update over here to start with. So Avalonia doesn't use target type. Instead, our styles are more like CSS. So we use selectors, and we can get rid of this key. We can update the selector to look like this. So that's pretty simple, but it's tedious to do that for every single style, and there's 20 odd different styles. So I've already done that for all of the other styles. It's the same process. We're effectively updating from the target type to the selector and changing the style. Everything else is broadly the same. So now that we've done that, let's save the app.xaml and pop back to the main view.xaml. We're going to need to replace this. So I'm going to use Control-H to bring up the find and replace. And I'm going to copy the name here of the static resources. And we're going to replace it with the Avalonia syntax. Now, because we're because we're CSS inspired in this case, we're using classes as a property name. So find and replace all. In that case, it was just one. Let's do the same here. So we're going to copy and paste that. In this case, it will replace 3 different items. We'll do the same again here. That's 5 replacements. Ooh. And 11. And with that, all of the errors are now fixed. So I'm going to hit save, and let's run it on the desktop to start with. So there we go. We manually ported our WPF application to run here on a Mac. So the majority of the code is exactly the same. It just requires tweaking and kind of massaging into the Avalonia specific XAML and a couple of changes to the code behind. It's a pretty simple process if your app is 100% WPF. But where it can become difficult is if you've got dependencies on things like Telerik, ActivePro, SyncFusion, DevExpress. Many of these control vendors don't support Avalonia natively. And so if you've built your application using these rich third-party controls, then you're kind of stuck. You either need to rebuild them with Avalonia, which can be a huge amount of work, or you can use our solution, which is Avalonia XPF. So let's take a look at that. So let's take a deeper look at this WPF project. We want to run this on Mac, Linux, iOS, Android, and the browser. But let's say we don't have the time or the resources to rewrite the application in Avalonia. We want to target those new platforms with the least amount of work possible. In this situation, Avalonia XPF is the perfect choice. Avalonia XPF is our cross-platform fork of WPF. So we've kept it largely unchanged. So in terms of presentation framework and presentation core, very few changes have occurred. But what we have changed is we've replaced MIL-Core, which is a composition renderer, MIL standing for Media Integration Layer. It's the unmanaged part that turns your application into pixels that get displayed within a DirectX canvas. We've replaced that with Avalonia. So this means we can take existing WPF applications with all the dependencies and we can bring them to macOS, Linux, iOS, Android, and the browser with little to no code changes. So let's see how we would do that with this calculator application. So let's have a look in the CS Proj. Right now we're targeting the Microsoft.NET SDK. So I'm going to change that project SDK to use the Avalonia XPF SDK. Now this is a licensed project, or product, I should say. So I'm going to include our license key, which is just a trial key in this case. And when I hit save, watch what happens to the red squiggly lines. So I'm saving now. And they've disappeared. So if we pop back, we can see that all of the types are now resolving. We've got no errors, and our application is now ready to run on a Mac. So I didn't have to change a single line of code to make this WPF application compatible with macOS. Oh, let's select desktop, and now we'll run. There we go. Notice that we have the native window control here, so the standard macOS window decoration. Also notice that if I divide by 0, we get the message box using the standard window decoration. So because the message box API is available within WPF, it's available to you within XPF. All of the APIs that you use in WPF, barring a few around 3D controls, are available to you in XPF. We also have the ability, when you're using third-party controls from the like of Telerik, Syncfusion, etc., if those are using GDI or WinForms, we can make those controls work on these new platforms as well. We have a whole list of all the control compatibility on the website. If you go to avaloniaui.net/XPF, you will find the list of controls that are currently working. It's a huge amount. So this is it running on a Mac. Let's have a look at it on another platform. I'll sign into the virtual machine here. So this is Ubuntu, virtual machine running in Parallels. The exact same project, literally no changes. Let's see the application run on Linux. There we go. And again, notice that we're using the standard window decoration for Ubuntu. And it's all continuing to just work. And if we divide by 0, we're going to get the dialog, and it's again using the standard window decoration. So that was a pretty easy port to macOS and Linux. We didn't have to change a single line of code. But how about running on some additional platforms? So I have a preview. This is hot off the press, but this is going to allow us to run on iOS, Android, and the browser. So if we have a look again at the CS Proj, there are some additional changes. So the biggest change you're going to notice is that the target frameworks now include iOS, Android, and the browser. And we've added some platforms. So we've got main activity, which is allowing us to bootstrap into the Android project, browser, desktop, and iOS. So this is kind of that approach that you see with MAUI, where it's a single project with different heads inside of them. So let's run on the browser to start with. I'm going to copy and paste this. I always forget the F, so it's good to copy and paste. There we go. We have a WPF app running in the browser. And let's see what happens if we divide by 0. Boom, we get a dialog. And we can also run on iPhone. So let's see if Rider will play ball. Hopefully it will. Sometimes it just needs a rebuild. Whilst we're waiting, let's manually launch the simulator. So I'm pretty sure I've deployed this already. There it is. I would like to connect the debugger so you can see it actually run, but it looks like Ryder is struggling to see that I'm on a Mac. So we'll manually launch it instead. So there we go. This is a WPF application running on iOS. And if we divide by 0, we get the dialog appear. So this is a huge, huge time saver for organizations that have deeply complex applications where they want to take them to new platforms. In fact, why don't we have a look at a slightly more complex application? We'll finish up by having a look at ILSpy. So this is the same ILSpy that you can grab from GitHub today. It's a very complex WPF application, and we've updated the project SDK. And truth be told, I think there was around 16 lines of code that have been changed. So it's not 100% without code changes, but we've taken ILSpy and we're now able to run it here on the Mac. And here we have it, the WPF version of ILSpy running on macOS. Now, what's really nice about this is that XPF integrates with the system. So if I open up File Picker, for example, we're getting the native macOS File Picker dialog available to us. Look at that, we've got WinForms dependencies that are working perfectly via XPF. Let's change the theme to light, and it all just works. So this feels like magic, but it's an incredibly powerful way to take your existing investments in your mission-critical WPF applications and bring them to macOS, Linux, iOS, Android, and the browser without having to rewrite that application. Now, when should you pick Avalonia and when should you pick Avalonia XPF? Well, it's entirely up to you. My recommendation would be if it's a new project or you can afford the time that it's going to take to port your existing WPF app to Avalonia, then use Avalonia, the open source project. It's free to do so. When you have an existing, very rich, complex WPF app, and you want to take it cross-platform, and you don't have the time to spend taking a year or two to do that port, and you just want to get to new platforms quickly, at that point, I would recommend using Avalonia XPF. Now, it doesn't have to be your destination. It can be a stepping stone to a gradual migration to full Avalonia. We've seen lots of customers choose to use XPF for that very reason. But you have options with the solutions available to you from Avalonia. If you have any questions at all about anything you've seen in this video, then feel free to send us an email. You can send it to team@avaloniaui.net. If you want to start a trial of Avalonia XPF, drop us an email at sales@avaloniaui.net or apply through our website. Thanks for watching. I hope you're productive and build some awesome apps using Avalonia technology. Thank you.